Welcome back to Let's Code. I'm Chris Biscardi, and today we're going to talk about configuration in CLI applications in Rust. Specifically, we're going to talk about this crate called Figment that I have in front of us right now. Now we can see the example that they have here right now, and it's basically a couple of configuration files, a couple of structs, and then a couple of sources for that configuration or where it can live. So let's take this example and let's see if we can get it running. So I'm going to create a new project called Figment test using cargo. If we open that up, we'll get the classic source main.rs, which we're just going to replace with the code that we saw. Oh, we actually can't do that to start with. So right off the bat, we find out that this is not a complete example. We do need to cargo add Figment, which in the current release of cargo will actually tell us whether we have any of the features installed or not. In this case, it has a number of features, things like environment, JSON. I'm not sure why it has parking lot, temp file, testing, TOML, and YAML. So that covers a lot of the configuration file types that people use in CLIs. I am still curious, and I think that we're going to end this video without answering this question, but I'm still curious as to how this would integrate with something like clap, because I use an argument parser like clap for all of my CLI applications. And this kind of overlaps with that a little bit. For example, we've got this env prefixed. So some of the values from this config could be like cargo underscore rustc as a string. Let's make this a main function so that it runs, and we'll debug config, and I will unwrap this instead of using the question mark because we just want this to run. I think we're going to have to add a couple features here. We're using environment variables and JSON files and TOML. So I think I'm going to do JSON TOML env. I think the feature JSON must be qualified by the dependency it's being activated for, like Figment JSON, TOML JSON, env JSON. That's not really what I want. So we'll go into the cargo TOML. We'll do version equals whatever we have here. Features equals TOML env JSON. And we can cargo run, and hopefully it will compile. Oh, and we also need Serday. So cargo add Serday. We need the derive feature on Serday. So f derive, and you can see that the derive feature and Serday derive were enabled. And if we look at the cargo TOML, the features derive is enabled for Serday, which is wonderful. I love this addition to cargo. Cargo add was originally in the cargo edit package. So if you're looking for more of that kind of thing, go look at cargo edit. But it's pretty wonderful, and I like it a lot. So can we run now? Cargo run. It would be nice if the example was complete. Config cannot be formatted using that. So we have got deserialize here. We will also do debug, run it again. And then we get quite a bit of errors. So in this case, we've got result unwrap on an error value because presumably we didn't give it the right amount of configuration. So in this case, we get tag default 1, profile, some profile, uncased default profile. So this configuration crate Figment supports profiles in the same way that you would use them for AWS, I believe, which is really interesting and one of the reasons that I wanted to look into the crate. The metadata, some metadata. So the TOML file from users Chris, Rust Adventure, Figment test, cargo TOML, provide location, source main.rs, interpolator, nothing, path package, missing authors. So this is currently reading the cargo.toml here. So we can just add authors, and I'll just do like Chris Biscardi. That's me. Yay. So the error wasn't the best, but it did point out exactly where I needed to fix something. So now we've got a config with a package inside of it. The package is Figment test. There's no description. I'm the author. I don't know what publish is. It's probably, yeah. So it's either option bool is really strange. So let me explain why option bool is really strange. Because you either publish something or you don't, if this is a bool, right? And you have to pick a default value anyway. So option bool is like retaining whether the user set a default value, but that's not really that useful for us. It's basically like, should we publish it or not? What's the default? And then rustc and rustdoc are not there. So let's do cargo run, but let's do one of the environment variables. So cargo underscore rust C, and this might actually mess up. Yeah, so we get rust C sum test. So that's cool. This is obviously a CLI that does nothing, so not super interesting. We do get the config struct that we've defined here. We get the package struct inside of that. I am mildly confused as to how we got a package. Like, this package is clearly the cargo toml, right? So we do a Figment new, we merge in a toml file that is the cargo toml. So that's this cargo toml. But how does that get under package? Maybe it has something to do with extract. I don't know. We'll find out in a second. And then we merge in whether it's env prefix cargo, env raw only rust C and rust stock. So if we were doing this, would this also work? No, because cargo pays attention to that. So let's use rust stock. So we can set prefixed environment variables. So this is like usually our app name goes here. We can also set raw environment variables. So we can pull in rust C or rust stock, which clearly also has an impact on how cargo works itself. So this is a little bit of a like inception-y example. Then we join in this JSON file, cargo.json. So presumably that could go in here as well. But the thing that I'm curious about here is how we get package there, because this has to be config. So let's take a look at extract and what extract is doing. Extract deserializes the collected value into T. So that's it. They've got this funky like jail thing going on for their tests. So I think this is meant to be a test. It's really weird to me that this doesn't have like code that works, if that makes sense. Like, this code is not in a function or anything, and it would have to be in like a main or a test or something for it to work. So super strange that these examples aren't written in a way that actually works. I feel like most other examples are, or they're small enough to not need the wrapping. But to have things that are supposed to be like defined at the root here, and then also things that are supposed to presumably be called inside of tests, that feels strange. So I'm not really, after looking at this, I'm not sure why we get a package here. Like, if I took these values and I replaced package here, if I can type correctly, what is going on? Okay, let's get that happening. Cut that, paste it. Nope, I copied it again. If I could type, this video would go much better. So let's get rid of this for the moment. And then this is all there. And then we run this again and we get errors. So missing field name. I do not understand why it's missing now. I guess it's pulling this variable here. So it's pulling from package because this is a toml file. That makes more sense. I think this is kind of a bad example to use because it's kind of inception-y and they should provide like something else. But this is coming in under package because the config has space for a package and the cargo toml has a toml header that is called package, which we can then pull these values from. That makes sense. Okay. I was thinking about it on a much flatter level. So that's all fine. This is okay, I guess. Like, I don't know that I feel like I'm getting much from it. This toml file is kind of nice. Like the ability to serialize a single toml file from some location and merge it with other things. But I don't see how this is going to integrate with clap very well. And I think that if we looked for it, there are closed issues in the clap repo that point to like file-based clap config that has been going on since 2016. You can see this is like 11 hidden items, and then we're into 2020. So this is going to allow us to pull in different files, and it provides some utilities for testing, which is kind of cool. But I don't know. If I'm going to be defining a CLI tool, I'm going to be using something like clap, and this doesn't seem like it integrates with clap very well. I guess we could pull in, like from AWS, for example, we could pull in the different key values and things like that. But clap also has support for global environment variables. So this would have to be a step that we use after, in which case we're probably not looking for that many files. And then we could probably also just use the toml crate and Serde, because it seems like that's really all this is doing if you do it with a single file. So clap would manage the environment variables. Then Figment could manage this toml file or this YAML file or whatever. I guess if you have, I don't know, if you have more and you want to put them into a file, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't necessarily see a lot of value there. I know that there's support for profiles here, which is really interesting. But you still have to pull that from the file anyway. So I'm not sure. It's interesting for sure. It is definitely capable. It is clearly able to merge like different files and sources together, which is really nice. I just don't know where it fits in combination with the other tools that I tend to use. It was pretty easy to get set up. The error messages are pretty descriptive. So if we go back and we get rid of what authors was the thing. So if we get rid of authors, then the error that we get here is pretty descriptive. So let's pull this into a file, take a look at it. So this is the full error that we get when some value is missing. It contains quite a bit of information. For example, it contains which profile we're using. In this case, it's the default profile. I don't know what tag is for. We could probably figure that out. There's some metadata here. So which file or which source, I guess, the error occurred in this case, which file is being used, and the location that this value needed to be provided at. So in this case, it's line 26, column 10. So line 26, column 10. So this TOML file. And then it's in the package field. The error is missing field authors. So we could display that. So we could probably put this into Miet or Color Air or something like that and produce a nice error. But it seems like it would take a lot of work to do that as well. It feels like this package is potentially nice if you're not using Clap, if you have to wire up your own config, and if you have to display like programmer level errors, maybe. I don't know. It clearly works, which is interesting. It clearly does the thing it needs to do. It integrates with Serday. But if we're integrating with Serday, why do we need whatever this is, right? It's just kind of like a merge function on multiple sources, which I totally get the value of, but I'm not sure that it integrates well with the other tools that I use. So again, I go back to Clap, I go back to other things. Clap already has support for environment variables. It has support for global environment variables. So if I needed config, that's probably where I would start. And if I used Figment in this way, then I wouldn't get the help text out of Clap that I'm used to having or used to supplying to people, which would be kind of disappointing. I would hate to lose that help information with Clap. The errors are really nice, which we've discovered. It seems like there are different merge strategies. So you could merge or you can join. If you have a key that's already set in the config and a later layer has the same key, you can either decide whether to take the original or the old one, or the new one or the old one. There is some extra sort of things. There are sort of providers and guides for library and application authors. For library authors, we kind of just like write this config. And then they suggest that you write these like from provider and Figment functions as impls on your config. And then you impl provider, which is the metadata, the data, and selecting a profile. I don't know. I don't know that I agree. I don't know that I agree with these APIs. And again, the issue for me is the integration with my other tools. It doesn't feel like this integrates. It feels like this is just going to be the only thing that I use. And it's okay for that. But I still have to wire up the errors myself, which feels a little weird. It feels like if this is going to be the thing that handles all of my configuration values, it should also handle printing out nice errors, or at least providing them in a way that I can give to Color Air or Miet or something like that without having to wire up all of the individual things, right? Like if I use this, I don't want to write the logic for displaying errors in every one of my CLI tools. But we can do profiles as this example shows. So in this case, we have just like another, if we're only going to use like headers for these things, then I don't know. I guess these are potentially dynamic. So we would still have to wire it up and choose one of them later. So your CLI tool still has to accept the flag to define which profile it's going to use. And if you're doing that, you can probably already pick one out of like the regular TOML. So I don't know. It feels like a library that was built for a very specific purpose, and that purpose just may not be a thing that I commonly run into, which is totally fine. But I am curious about it. I'm happy I pulled it around. I'm happy I played with it a little bit. And I hope that this was illuminating for you. I hope that this helped you. There's quite a lot of configuration libraries in Rust. Like if we do config, hey, so here's config, which is also a layered configuration system, right? It's being used quite a bit. What is Figment's usage? That's one interesting thing. So Figment is using or being used at 240,000 downloads. Whatever recent means. I don't know what recent means in the last month. But config is 1.5 million in the same time period. And Figment, not necessarily that the last time it was updated is super important, but it was updated about a year ago. And then config was updated about 16 hours ago. I think there's also Comfy and some others. So Confi, if I remember correctly. Yeah, here's more configuration management, although this one updated quite a while ago. Maybe we'll go over config in the next one. Basically has the same support for stuff. So it has JSON, YAML, TOML. It also has RON files, which is super interesting. And JSON 5. So I think JSON 5 is the extension to JSON that has comments and stuff. RON is a Rust format. I haven't actually found a use case for RON yet, but it is interesting in the sense that we can have kind of these Rust structs that are just stored on disk like this, I think, and they will serialize into Rust structs. So config is also layered config. There's a couple others. There's Comfy, there's config, there's Figment, there's, I feel like a couple others. There's the default behavior and clap. So you've got a lot of options. You could also manually implement it yourself using directories being a crate and not just like me saying use folders. So maybe we'll go over config in another video. I'm not super impressed with Figment right now. I really just can't find a place that it makes sense for me to use. I think it's interesting. I think that the concept of building in profiles as configuration in the same way that AWS has profiles is super interesting. I think that building in support for multi-account users from the beginning is something that is super useful if you can pull it off. So having some extra by default is really nice. And I hope this helped. I hope you found out a little bit more about some more crates in the ecosystem, and I'll catch you in the next video.